Very special thanks to Barrow Motors of Burnham-on-Sea for providing the Nissan 370Z in this review, and of course if you are interested in this car or maybe something else which they currently have for sale, then of course you can find all of those details as well as their current stock page and their contact us page by clicking the link to their website right below this video in the description. When it comes to their development of high-performance cars, Nissan actually reminds me quite a bit of Porsche, because they simultaneously can make both ends of the spectrum work so well. On the one hand, you have the GTR, sometimes critiqued for being like a drivable computer, but overwhelmingly fast, incredible lap times, incredible performance, and that's what comes first, much like Porsche with the turbo models, the GT3s. But then on the other end, you have the Z. The Fairlady lineage, 350Z, 370Z, now the 400Z. For want of a better term, a simpler kind of car, more old school, more about the feel, the charisma, the personality, the vibe, the fun, if you will. Much like Porsche with the Boxster and the Cayman, which are pretty good rivals to this car as well. Now, when it comes to this Z, one of the things I like about it is that much like Porsche, and you could say many other brands as well, they offer just enough options to cover so many different bases than just, here's your sports car, it comes in one trim, like it or don't like it. They did so much more than that, and it's more than just having an open or a closed roof, which of course this one can come in. Convertible, coupe, here of course driving the coupe version, and you can get it as an automatic as well, although the one that I'm driving is the manual. Now, one reason why I love this car is it is one of those occasions where it proves my argument of modern automatics being superior, because the automatic version is both faster and more efficient on fuel than the manual version. And that's not just my opinion, it's been tested and proven. The manual version does 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds, the auto in 4.6 seconds, and according to actual owners' aggregated reviews, the fuel economy on average is 26 miles per gallon on the manual, whereas the owners report 30 miles per gallon average in the auto. That doesn't surprise me at all, because a computer 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, will know the better time to change gear and what gear to be in at any given moment than a driver ever will, or at least than a driver thinks they will. Now, in terms of the performance, you heard the numbers. It's quick either way, and the engine is, well, lovely. It's perfect for a sports car. 3.7 litre, as the name suggests, naturally aspirated V6, so there's no turbo lag, no supercharger whine, just the pure power of that very well engineered Japanese engine, about 330-ish horsepower, and that really does depend on the market. The American cars have a little bit more, Japanese cars are around that higher range as well, UK a little bit less for some reason, about 324 from what I can find, but most of them are around 324 to 332, so it's not like it varies that much. In terms of torque, you're looking at 270 pound-feet, not too bad, not crazy good, but not too bad, which is about 360 newton meters. One of the potential issues with that engine, at least on paper though, is that it produces that torque and that peak power at higher revs. Peak power is at 7,000. Not too surprising, but the peak torque is quite high as well. 5,200 RPM to really get the most twisting power out of that engine. That isn't ideal. You really want torque to come around 1,500 to 2,500 to be able to use it all the time. So the question is, how does it feel in practice? Does the engine feel like you're having to work the gearbox hard? Does the performance have to wind itself up? Well, actually, no. They've done a lovely job of engineering the car, I have no doubt in automatic form and even here in manual form, to actually feel more torquey than it is. So, very well done to Nissan on that front. The car itself is not overly heavy, it's less than 1,500 kilos, so it's not super light, but it certainly isn't heavyweight, and interestingly, it's actually kind of smaller than the 350Z. It's a little bit wider, but it's shorter to the ground. The roofline, that is, of course, and the length is shorter as well. In fact, the overall length is 2.7 inches less, but the wheelbase is 4 inches less within that body, which is quite a significant difference between the two cars. The width is 1.3 inches wider though, so it has much more of that squat stance, and the height is only 0.3 of an inch difference, so that's fairly negligible. The overall vibe that the car has, though, is definitely what I would describe, and this goes to the proportions, this goes to the engine, and it even stretches out to the handling, which has been critiqued by some people, and I'm going to add my thoughts to that in just a second, but that single word which I would use to describe how this car feels is chunky. And that probably seems like a strange word to describe it, because chunky is more of a peanut butter term than a car term, but what I mean by that is the vehicle is small enough and light enough, quote unquote, and powerful enough but not overly powerful that it feels just enough in every way. It's light on its feet, the turn-in is very sharp, it actually belies the front engine layout where it could easily be way too front heavy, but it really isn't. But at the same time you can feel kind of a muscular little pit bull kind of vibe to it behind that, and that's what I mean by chunky. It's got purpose behind it, it's got personality, it's got attitude, and I can actually understand why some people have critiqued it in that sense, because some have said, some journalists, that it feels more like a muscle car than a sports car. Maybe it's not quite ladylike, it's not quite dainty enough, despite the Fairlady name, ironically. I actually don't think that's a bad thing. It has some heft to it, and these days you kind of need that, because Porsche is already doing the more kind of svelte, old school sports car thing very well, and they've got it down to a T, so don't necessarily fight them at their own game. And that's something which I've believed for years. You've got really two choices when it comes to making a great car. You can either do what everyone's doing better than them, or you can do something different that very few people are doing and do it well. Nissan here clearly went for the latter. The vibe is different, and it benefits from that so much. This is not a sports car for people who want something that feels like some little dainty British sports car or a modern day equivalent to an Italian classic. There's none of that here. This feels like it has that heft, that chunkiness, that attitude, and I think it's all the better for it, and it is certainly complemented by that barky V6 engine, which gives it tons more personality as well. And that is why I said in the thumbnail about the European vibe that the car has, because that is more of a European kind of personality trait. Japanese cars don't tend to have a huge amount of charisma, which is why I think this one is so impressive. They did a very good job of that. Now, in terms of using one of these all the time, maybe as a daily, maybe just as a sports car, what is it really better for? Because some cars can do both, even with two seats. I will say the most prohibitive thing by far about the Z as a daily driver is the economy. And this is that occasion where the automatic is superior to the manual, 30 to the gallon average compared to 26 average. 30 isn't too bad if you do choose the manual. 26 to the gallon average, you'll have to decide if you're okay with that or not. For a 330 horsepower car, I guess it's about fine really, certainly for its performance, but for some people that may be prohibitive. In terms of space, I would actually say that could be a downside, not so much because it's a two-seater, because obviously you know you're going to not have any rear space, but more so because the cabin does feel small, I will say. I could fit in the car, but it's not necessarily a car which I'd want to spend a huge amount of time in personally, because it was fairly claustrophobic, and that comes from someone who actually likes cars with claustrophobic cabins, but in a different kind of way. To me, more like an AMG GT has my kind of claustrophobic interior, like a supercar. This, not so much. The seat is a little bit too upright for my taste, the roofline feels just a tad too low, but again, that's a me problem, not necessarily the car's problem, and many drivers of a more average height probably will never have an issue. Boot space is pretty good for that coupe style with the more hatchback design, much like the 350Z of course, and in terms of issues, most of the ones which I could find online seem to be in the really high mileage category, like over 100,000, and let's be honest, no matter how well engineered a car is, that is the kind of territory you're going to expect to start to have some kind of issues popping up. With these, it seems to be some power steering issues, some oil related issues, so keep an eye out for those of course. Always look for a good history with the car. If nothing else, a history always shows that it's been loved, and that is at least half the battle. In terms of pricing, well, that's where things get pretty wild with these 370Zs, because they vary, at least in the UK, by a massive margin. You can get them as cheap as 9 grand, which is a massive amount of performance for the money. I mean, 4.6, 4.7 seconds, even if you go on the lower end of the range at the quoted, low 5-second region, or more like the mid 5-second on the convertible, that's still pretty damn quick for a 9 grand car. On the higher end though, if you're buying like a 2020 shape, especially something like a Nismo trim, well, you're going to be paying 35, 36 grand even for a used one. So there's a huge, vast swath between those two. In reality, if you're looking for one of these, like just clean as they come, no special edition, just a standard entry level, but you know, as good as it's really needing to be, 370Z, you're looking at about 12 to maybe 18,000. You'll get good mileage in that region. This particular example is in that region with about 50,000 miles on the clock. So not crazy low, not like a collector's car, but certainly manageable. So yeah, it really depends on what you want to pay. At the end of the day, you can pay a lot more to get super low miles, great condition, maybe a special edition or a Nismo of some kind, or you can go on the lower end, take a bit more of a risk, and still get quite a lot of car for the money. To summarise my thoughts then on the 370Z, coming at this vehicle from the point of view of someone who's not a massive two-seater sports car fan, I'm more of a 2+2 GT kind of guy, coming at it as someone who's definitely not a manual fan most of the time, but even then working with it, and I will say enjoying the gearbox, it is a good one to work with. I will say the car definitely impressed me. I didn't have high or low expectations, to be honest. I went into it fairly neutral, with the ability to fall either way based on simply how the car came across. With these many miles on it, in this kind of age and condition, it still impressed me just as much as the new one would have. So overall, I would say if you are looking for definitely a more affordable choice of car which still looks great, still has great performance, certainly very interesting and very capable handling, if nothing else when it comes to fun, maybe even for some lap times or track days as well thrown in there, with the only real downsides being not great fuel economy and not necessarily the most spacious of cabins, and some have also critiqued the cabin style, but my stance on that is it's Japanese, so what do you really expect? Then yeah, I would say my verdict is it's a good car. It doesn't necessarily have the badge recognition or presence of a Porsche Cayman. You could argue it's maybe not as pretty as something like that, or maybe even some other rivals as well, but it offers a very strong all-round platform, fantastic performance for the money. It's a very pretty looking car with a lot of very, very well respected Japanese engineering put into it. Chances are it's a lot more reliable than many other sports cars on the market as well because of that. And if you want to use it as a daily, well, the level of comfort and the refined ride which it has, despite what I said about the interior, is actually very good. The ride itself is good. It's comfortable, it's surprisingly smooth, and it doesn't rattle your teeth out like a sports car very easily could. So overall, that's it for my thoughts on the 370Z. Of course, if you're an owner of one of these, if you used to have a Z, maybe even a 350, drop your thoughts down below, maybe some warnings or issues that you had with yours in the past that a potential owner should look out for. And if you are on the market for buying one, of course, check out the comments down below to see those. But until next time, I'll see you with more reviews. Of course, you can check out the Beards and Cars playlist here on the channel to see plenty of other episodes. And until next time, I'll see you then. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.